And what compounds the problem is a trial judge can make rulings in this area of the law that fall within her discretion. And when a trial judge is making a decision that's based on her discretion, it's even harder to defeat that ruling on appeal. So there's a lot of good reasons to open the door and say, what can we work out? What can we do to manage the risk? And that's what we did, and that's why we entered into settlement negotiations, and that's why we're going to present to you where we are tonight and what we hope to present in the near future. As for where we are with Fair Share Housing Center, I'm going to just speak very broadly since these agreements aren't finalized, and I'm going to resist too detailed questions about this because there are a few details that need to be resolved with entering into an agreement with Fair Share Housing Center and with Sylvan. But what we think we can accomplish in a settlement mode with Fair Share Housing Center is a dramatic reduction in what your obligations would be. We think we could adjust the number down. We're hoping to a number roughly 100. That's not finalized yet. And there will still be the issue of the unmet need. We've discussed at length what we can do with respect to that unmet need. And you'll be hearing from Mike Mistretta in a bit, and he'll tell you about that. In terms of, so that's in terms of the settlement with Fair Share Housing Center, we think we're going to be able to manage this risk of, instead of having an adjusted number of over 2 or over 300, we're going to be looking at a number much closer to 100.
So Jeff, that 100 represents 20%, right?
No, it's not based on 20%. It's based upon how much land is available, and we're still, going through that with Fair Share Housing Centers, what the adjustment would be. In a litigation mode, that wouldn't be 100. They would be pushing for a number way higher than that.
But our plan was 77 on Hudson Terrace. We could have found a few more. So,
let me just.
What happened to that plan?
We're not done.
What happened to that plan?
They will answer questions after the presentation, Mayor.
That wasn't a question, it was a statement.
We're not.
It's a question.
We don't know that we're going to get 100. We're still negotiating with them. They're tough negotiators. We're trying to get the number down as low as we can. They're going to want to try to get the number higher. It's not done. That's why I'm being cautious about how much I say about it. Now, in terms of compliance, where the contours of the agreement that we're trying to finalize and ultimately vote on, there'd be basically 2 things that you would need to do to address your adjusted number. You'd have to rezone the 800 Sylvan site to permit roughly 400 units, 80 of which would be affordable. And the municipal site, you would have to allow the development of 15 units, a 5-unit group home and 10 units of affordable housing, which would be radically less than if they fought and they succeeded and your adjusted number was 200 or 300. In terms of the portion of the obligation that you're not going to be able to create a realistic opportunity for, the so-called unmet needs segment, there are a number of things that Fair Share Housing Center is going to be looking for to address that. The difference between addressing an adjusted number and the unmet need, it's a different legal standard. The adjusted number, it's called the realistic development potential. And the way to think about it, you have an obligation to create a realistic opportunity for your realistic development potential. As to the portion that you don't have enough land to address, the so-called unmet need, which could be in the neighborhood of 400 units, in a settlement mode, you can decide on what you're going to do, and you're not going to be expected to meet the full 400, but make a good faith effort. So we've talked about what would satisfy Fair Share Housing Center with respect to the unmet need. So that is a broad summary, and what we were talking about there is, we would have a development fee ordinance, we would have an overlay ordinance in certain areas to allow development to occur at higher densities. and Mike Mistretta will go over that in greater detail. As far as the agreement with Sylvan is concerned, again, it's not final, and it's not going to be final until there's a vote after a public hearing. But we're talking about, instead of facing the risk of 600 or over 800, they bring it down to 400, and there would be a townhouse section, roughly 94 townhouses, roughly 306 apartments, and of those 400, 80 would be affordable. Now there could be changes in how they go about addressing their affordable, and that 400 might come down slightly, but that would be the contour. Instead of having a risk of 6 or 800 plus, you would control the risk at 400, and you would control how that site would be developed. You would negotiate those terms, and that's what we've been doing. There'd be limits on height, there'd be limits on access to Floyd, there'd be limits on buffers and setbacks from Sylvan. There would be a number of features that we would negotiate into this to try to make that project as acceptable and as integrated in the community as possible. The other part of the agreement is what happens in these agreements is Fair Share Housing Center typically demands a fee. In the case of Englewood Cliffs, Fair Share Housing Center has asked for and demanded a particularly high fee because we've been litigating very hard for a while now. And part of the settlement would be that Sylvan would have to pay that tax.
What are the numbers? What are the numbers? What's the litigation?
There's a concern, and there always has been a concern with developing on the Sylvan site number of school-age kids. You know, can our schools absorb the anticipated influx in children? And we have an expert here tonight, Bob Powell, who's analyzed that issue and who will speak to that issue. The agreement that that has yet to be finalized is they're going to want to make sure that they can move forward and develop their land, even if the planning board does not sign up and does not support their development. Towns can rezone even if the planning board doesn't, but that's what they would need so that we could get this down from a risk of 600 to 800 down to 400, and where we could control the kind of development that happens on the site. Now, I'd like to conclude with a few remarks. One, you might reasonably say, well, why are we settling? Towns settle to manage risk. There's a lot of risk here. And there's a lot of bad things that could happen in this litigation if we don't find a way to manage risk. Towns settle so that they know what they're getting instead of face the prospect that a judge decides it and makes decisions that you may hate, but you have no control over it. So we're doing our best in this negotiation process to come up with a project that is as integrated and as best for your community as possible. Do we wish we didn't have to deal with it? Sure. But that's not the reality. The reality is we're facing litigation, judge is not happy, the demands are much higher, we're trying to control the risk and control what happens on the property. You know, there are several risks that we're managing by settling. One risk is if we didn't settle, we went forward with our own plan that didn't address and adjust the number of 77, or that addressed the number of just 77, not a number that of 150 or 250, or whatever the judge might rule. You know, that plan has an estimated price tag associated with it of $12.7 million. And there's no guarantee that the developer of that site would get tax credits and that you wouldn't suffer that $12.7 million exposure. And moreover, there's a danger that that cost could go higher. It was just an estimate. So settling manages that risk. In a litigation mode, the numbers that were proffered by and are advocated and that would be litigated range from 223 to 342. And through settlement, we're trying to whack that number and bring that number down as low as possible.
What happens in 2025?
Let me finish and I'll answer all questions. Another risk that we face in litigation, and it's a significant risk, is if we went to litigation with the plan that we've adopted now and we lost, and the number in a litigation mode went from 77 to 177, let's say, you don't know, that could happen. The question becomes, who gets to cure that 100? Now, under that scenario, I fight with every fiber of my being, no, we should get the right to cure that 100. In a litigation mode, Fair Share Housing Center and 800 Sylvan are going to say, no, we get to solve it. And they're going to take away your ability to control what happens on that property if that happens. Now, if we had produced a boatload of affordable housing and we could show this as a minor slippage, that's one thing. We don't have one unit of affordable housing we can point to. Not one. So there's that. There's a risk that, that we lose the appeal. I mean, right now our appellate papers will probably be due the end of August. We did everything we could to put it off as long as we could. But if this case doesn't settle and we go to litigation and an appellate court says, you know, Judge Toscos wrongfully dismissed their suit, they're entitled to seek a builder's remedy. I don't think they're going to be seeking 400 units. I think they're going to be demanding a lot more. We control that risk if we settle. The risk here is that in a litigation mode, you could spend a fortune on litigation and end up a lot worse off. So the reason why towns settle is not because they love the developer. They settle because they're trying to manage risk. And there's a tremendous amount of risk. And that's why all the attorneys that have represented this town have encouraged this town and have recommended that this town try to settle this lawsuit because the risk of litigation are very, very substantial. And I certainly stand with, I recommend settlement because I want to manage those risks. I don't want a judge standing with his master and having his master say, what do you think is reasonable? Hearing from us and hearing from 800 Sylvan or anyone else and hearing very different stories. I would rather have some measure of control about what goes on that site and make that as best as possible. So I recommend settlement. And those are my comments. I don't know if you want to...
What happens in 2025? That's a legal issue.
In 2025, it starts all over again.
Yes, sir.
Okay?
6 years.
In 2025...
So everything starts over again in 2025?
Yeah, and let me make a public official announcement. Talk to your legislatures. You know, I mean, the cure is in the Fair Housing Act. There's nothing that seems to have legs right now. You know, if you don't want this to happen in 2025, there needs to be a groundswell of people talking to their legislature. Right now, I don't see anything on the horizon that has legs.
Can you ask questions?
Well, we will open up the questions after the planner presents. Mike Mistretta will make his presentation.
Round of applause for Jeff Serenian. It's a nice performance.
Well, again, nothing Mr. Serenian said changes my view that no residential housing should be at 800 Sylvan, just to be clear.
And I would just like to say at this juncture, wow, you guys were wonderful. I mean, you guys sat, you listened to all of this, there was nothing going on. Round of applause for you guys, because that is
Patronizing everyone.
Our next person up is going to be Mike Mistretta. Okay, Mike Mistretta is basically the straw that stirs the drink. He's the one that's going to give you the pictures of what the numbers say. He's the one that's going to show you what these conceptions and this concept look like. He's a partner at Harper Associates in Cranford, New Jersey since 1990. His principal focus is on addressing municipalities' affordable housing obligations. His expertise in consulting are found in the townships of Berkeley Heights, Scotch Plains, Mount Laurel, Cranford, Garwood, City of Elizabeth, Kenilworth, and Hillside. He has a Bachelor of Science degree in Environmental Planning and Design, as well as Landscape Architecture from College at Rutgers University, and has done graduate work in City and Regional Planning at Rutgers. He holds professional planner licenses as well as Landscape Architecture license. He's going to give us a slideshow presentation. They don't call it slideshows anymore, I'm sorry, I'm not up on all that many terms. But they're going to do that. I know it's like inherent the wind in here, but please pay attention and let's bring it over to Mike Mistretta.
Can everybody hear me? No. Is it okay if I speak with the computer?
Can't hear you.
Can't hear you.
Can you hear me?
No.
Okay. I'm going to try doing my presentation from the laptop. Is it possible that we can have the lights dim? I don't think we need them all the way off, but I just want to make sure people in the back can see the screen. Thank you. All the way in the back? Can you see the screen? Okay, thank you. I have a very short PowerPoint. I'm better with graphics than speaking. I think graphics will tell a better story. My presentation is really broken up into 3 phases. The first phase is very short. What did we adopt in December of 2018? A little summary of that. And then Mr. Serenian went through what happened since then and the settlement negotiations. And then I'm going to walk you through generally where we are. I have too many attorneys telling me what I'm allowed to say, what I'm not allowed to say, or we're still under settlement. So you got to bear with me a little bit on that because I'm not trying to play any games with you. I'm going to try and answer every question that you have, but the attorney's got to stop telling me you can't say this, you can't say that because of confidentiality and stuff like that. I'm going to just try and I'm going to walk a fine line if I can. And then I'm going to end this PowerPoint presentation, and then I'm going to put up a separate slide, which is a concept plan that I'm still working on. Just to give you, I'll say it again when I get there, but I have to close out this PowerPoint, go to the concept plan. It's too large of a file on 800 Sylvan, so if you bear with me, I'll bring that document up when I'm done. My first slide is, some of you may have attended the planning board hearing back in December of 2018. Myself and Mr. Serenian did a presentation. I prepared what's called a housing element and fair share plan. It's great reading if you can't sleep at night, but at the end of the day, what that document does is address how the town intends on addressing its affordable housing. And it was adopted in January 7, 2019, and it was endorsed by the council on January 24, 2019. And what that document included was an outline of the town's obligation. As you can see up on the screen, the prior round obligation, 1987 to 1999, was $219. Part of that requirement that Mr. Serenian said, the town was required to construct a 4-unit affordable housing complex on the Lions Club property, also known as the Hudson Terrace property, which was never constructed. The town was also required to adopt an overlay ordinance of 6 units an acre on the Prentice Hall site, which is the new LG corporate campus that is now going up. But we never adopted that ordinance. That ordinance was supposed to be for a 6 unit per acre over 25 acres. And again, it's an overlay ordinance. It would have allowed for 150 units to be constructed on that site, which would have 30 affordable housing units built within that project. That was never done, okay? Then the third round came 1999 to 2025, our number was 365. So our total is 584. That's the magic number that we're still trying to get our hands around. The plan that I presented in December and was approved in January addressed what's called the realistic development potential, an RDP of 77 units. And we did that by putting a 100% affordable housing site on the Hudson Terrace property, right next to Borough Hall. And along with our bonus credits, we had 57 units, plus our credits, our bonus credits for doing family rental units. We were able to meet the magic number, an RDP of 77. That's the document that I completed. I testified to it, and it's on record, and that's where the town is at this moment. That same document was also submitted to the court and as part of this ongoing litigation. As part of that plan, this unmet need, we had 3 overlay areas, one on East Palisades Avenue, one on Hudson Terrace, and one known as the B3 zone rehabilitation area. And collectively, we would have, those are overlay zones, altogether we would have gotten 95 affordable housing units on those 3 overlay areas. The borough also adopted what's called a mandatory set-aside ordinance in October of 2018, which essentially says if you come in for a project that has above a certain number of residential units, they would have a mandate that you incorporate affordable housing within your project if it's above 5 units or more. Now, sorry if this is a hard drawing to look at, but this is the document. I was just talking about this 55-unit project. This is the concept that was part of that plan. In order to get those 55 units on the Hudson Terrace site, there was a consideration of rearranging and rehabilitating some of the municipal buildings. In this scenario, the police station and the community center would have been reconstructed next to the firehouse, opening up land where we could accommodate more units, and all of the properties would have been constructed on borough-owned land. Altogether, we showed 55 units on this plan. That was our plan, the 55 units, and you also get 20 bonus credits for doing those units. So we're meeting a number of 77 with this plan. I spoke of the 3 overlay areas. One is the green area all the way to my left was the B3 zone. Then we had the Hudson Terrace, which is the purple. And then we had the East Palisades Avenue overlay. Those are what's in our plan today. Those are my 3 overlay areas. What does an overlay area mean? It means the existing zoning on those properties, if you own any of those properties in those 3 areas identified on this map, the underlying zoning remains intact. Nothing changes on the underlying zoning. But you get this added right, this overlay zoning, that if you wanted to build housing, we gave you 2 options. One, you could do a 100% residential project, market rate project, and if you did that, it was based on a density of 15 units an acre, and you had to provide a set-aside within those units of 15% if it was rental, 20% if it was for sale. As an encouragement to create some type of meaningful downtown or strengthen our commercial corridors, we increased the density to 20 units an acre, 20 residential units an acre, if you also incorporated a mixed-use component. The first floor would be a retail, commercial, restaurant use, and then there would be 2 levels of apartments on top of that. And by incorporating that mixed-use restaurant, apartments over retail, commercial, you got a density bonus to go up to 20 units an acre. So that's the plan that's on file today. That's the plan that I presented to the planning board and was adopted by the planning board in January and endorsed by the council. Now, the next slides go into what has changed since then, why has it changed, what type of numbers am I looking at, and how are we addressing it. After we submitted this report, and it was adopted by the planning board and the council, it was also used as my expert report on this litigation that was filed with the board. Again, my report on top, Borough of Englewood Cliffs, I provided a plan that reached 77 units. I'll skip to the prospective settlement for a minute. What happened after that was 2 additional reports challenging my report. 800 Sylvan hires an expert planner who does his own report. He submitted a report that's on file with the court, and he says the RDP should be 161 to 334 in our town. Fair Share Housing Center hires their planner, expert witness, and he prepared a report, filed it with the court, and that report said the RDP should be 223. What's it? Sorry? Yes, 223 affordable housing units. Now, the one that's missing is a court-appointed special master who's like an arm of the court, if you will, supposed to be the mediator between all of the parties. There's no number there. That report has been withheld. That's on hold right now. All right? All sides have agreed. The court, our borough, and 800 Sylvan and Fair Share Housing have agreed that that report will not be released unless we cannot settle this. If we cannot settle this and it goes to court, then that report gets released. I don't know what that number is. So that's why it's blank up there. The prospective settlement agreement, as Mr. Serenian said, don't hold me to this number, please, because, again, we're looking at, I'm here tonight, I put up a slide, I'm trying to wonder all day, what number do I put up there? I've been involved in this every day. I have 100 plus or minus. It could go down a little bit, it can go up a little bit if we agree to settle. So I'm just trying to be as honest with you as I can, but I don't know what that number is going to be at the end of the day to settle. But I think I'm pretty close. Now, I had that first slide up there that summarized where we were. What are the changes between this? If we do this settlement agreement, and again, I'm at a very high level without trying to get into too much details, I had that previous slide that summarized where we were. I had the RDP at 77. The RDP would now go to around 100, maybe a little bit more, maybe a little bit less. That 100% affordable housing site, we had 57 units over there. That goes to 15 units, okay, under the settlement arrangement. So we dropped that from 57 to only 15 units, and I'll get the slides on every one of these sites in a minute, would be constructed on Hudson Terrace. And then there's 800 Sylvan Avenue. We would collect 80 credits on that property if we were to agree to this settlement. That 80 credits is based on 400 units total. Within the 400 units, 20% set aside. That's how we get the 80 units. On the unmet need, I spoke of 3 overlay areas before. And they all had it was either a 15 or a 20% set aside. Under the settlement, all of the set asides would be 20%, regardless if you're a 100% residential project or if you're a mixed-use project. It wouldn't matter anymore, and we would still have a 20% set aside. If we were to settle the East Palisades Avenue overlay area, if you remember the blue area, I'll go back there in a minute, that comes off the board. That's eliminated. We don't do that. The Hudson Terrace and the B3 zone, the purple and the blue, the green areas remain. The number of units collected would go up because we would go up to that 20% set aside. And 3 new things would come on the table. And I have concepts and for each one of these, and I'll go over one by one. I'm not going to rush through it too quickly. 111 Sylvan Avenue, we would pick up 9 units there on an overlay. Sisters of Peace property, we would allow affordable housing units on that property. They would be all age restricted. I should have said that with the 111 Sylvan Avenue, also all age restricted on those properties. And then 1000 Sylvan Avenue, we go back to Prentice Hall on the new